I didn't even know his name until he said I was his boyfriend in front of the entire school. The first thing I remember is the sound. Not voices, not footsteps, just that low ripple of attention, like when something shifts in a room and everyone feels it before they understand it. Then hands. Warm, firm, sudden, around my waist. I froze. Completely. My brain lagged a full 3 seconds behind reality, trying to process why Lucas Hale, the Lucas Hale, was standing next to me, why he was touching me, and more importantly, why half the student body was suddenly staring like I'd grown a second head. There you are, he said, casual, like this was normal, like we'd done this 100 times before. Too close. Way too close. His voice dropped just enough for only me to hear. Don't panic. Just nod. Don't panic. That was a funny instruction considering my heart was trying to break a land speed record inside my chest. I should have stepped back. I should have said something. Anything. Instead, I nodded. Just once. And that was all it took. Lucas turned slightly, just enough to face the crowd gathering near the steps outside the main building, his arms still around me like it belonged there. This is Aiden, he said smoothly, like he was introducing something simple, harmless. My boyfriend. Silence hit first. Then the noise came crashing in. Whispers. Phones lifting. Someone actually gasped like this was a reality show reveal. My boyfriend. The words didn't land right. They hovered somewhere above me. Unreal, like I was watching someone else's life from a distance. Because this didn't make sense. Not even a little. Yesterday, Lucas Hale didn't know I existed. Yesterday, I was just background. The kind of person people pass in the hallway without remembering 5 seconds later. And now? Now his hand was still resting at the small of my back, steady, grounding in a way that felt dangerously convincing. Not part of the deal. Except there was no deal. Not yet. I swallowed, finally finding enough awareness to glance up at him. Big mistake. His expression didn't match the situation. No panic. No hesitation. Just calm control, like he'd already calculated every possible outcome. And decided this was the best move. And somehow, that made it worse. Because it meant this wasn't an accident. He meant to do this. Smile, he murmured under his breath, barely moving his lips. Trust me. Trust him? I didn't even know him. But my face, traitor that it was, shifted anyway, something that probably resembled a smile if you didn't look too closely. His thumb brushed lightly against my side, a subtle, almost absent movement. Micro, intentional, real enough to make my stomach flip. This was wrong, completely insane. And yet, no one was questioning it. Not really. They were accepting it, processing it, building a narrative around it in real time. Lucas Hale had a boyfriend. And apparently, it was me. I exhaled slowly, trying to ground myself in something logical, something solid. There had to be an explanation. There had to be a reason. Because things like this didn't just happen. Not to people like me. Not unless there was something behind it. Something I hadn't seen yet. Something I definitely wasn't prepared for. The moment the bell rang, everything got louder instead of quieter, like the entire school had decided that walking between classes was no longer the priority, and I was. Eyes followed me. Phones tilted in my direction. Someone whispered my name, which was unsettling because I was pretty sure 90% of them did not know it yesterday. Lucas did not let go. Not when we stepped off the front steps. Not when we moved through the hallway. Not even when the crowd thinned just enough for me to breathe again. His hand stayed at my back, steady, deliberate, like he was anchoring me to something I did not understand. Too consistent. Too real. Not part of the deal. Except now there was a deal. Apparently. I finally stopped walking halfway down the hall, forcing my feet to cooperate with the part of my brain that had caught up and was now screaming for answers. Okay, I said under my breath, keeping my voice low but tight. You need to explain what just happened. Lucas paused with me, turning just enough so that his body blocked part of the hallway traffic, creating this strange little pocket of privacy in the middle of chaos. He did not look rushed. He did not look nervous. He looked like someone who had expected this exact moment. I will, he said calmly. But not here. Not helpful. My pulse kicked up again, frustration mixing with something dangerously close to curiosity. He glanced down the hall, then back at me, eyes sharp but not unkind. Walk with me. That was not a question, and for reasons I could not fully explain, I followed. Again, we slipped into an empty classroom, the kind teachers used during free periods, quiet and slightly too cold from the air conditioning. The door clicked shut behind us, and just like that, the noise outside dulled into something distant and manageable. Lucas stepped back then. Finally. Space. I did not realize how aware I had been of him until that distance existed again. My skin felt weirdly cold without it. That was a problem I was not ready to unpack. He leaned casually against one of the desks. Arms crossing like this was just another normal conversation between two people who definitely had not just detonated a social bomb in front of half the school. I need you to pretend to be my boyfriend, he said, direct, no build-up, like he was ordering coffee. I stared at him, blinked once, twice. You already said that part, I replied, because apparently my brain had decided sarcasm was the best defense mechanism available. I meant the part where you explain why. A flicker of something crossed his expression. Not hesitation. Calculation. There is a situation, he said carefully. Rumors. People who are interested in making things complicated for me. That sounded vague on purpose. I narrowed my eyes. And your solution was to grab a random guy and announce we are dating? You were not random. The words landed faster than I expected. Clean. Certain. No room for misunderstanding. I opened my mouth, then closed it again, thrown off balance by the way he said it, like it was obvious, like I was the only one who did not have that information. You are quiet, he continued, tone even. You keep to yourself. You are not part of the groups that would turn this into something worse. He paused, studying me for half a second longer than necessary. And you are? Safe. Safe. That word did something strange in my chest. Not dramatic, just enough to make me aware of it. I crossed my arms, mirroring his posture without meaning to. So I am convenient. You are reliable, he corrected smoothly. Of course he did. I let out a breath, dragging a hand through my hair, trying to ground myself in something logical again. This was insane, completely unreasonable. And yet, it made a certain kind of sense. Not good sense, but enough. And what exactly does pretending involve? I asked slowly. Lucas pushed off the desk then, closing the distance between us by a step. Not too close, just enough to shift the air again. Controlled. Intentional. Public appearances, he said. Staying close. Letting people believe it. His voice softened slightly, just at the edges. That is all. That is all. Right. Because standing in front of everyone while he called me his boyfriend had felt so simple. I looked at him, really looked this time, searching for something that would make this easier to refuse. Arrogance. Manipulation. Anything. But all I found was that same calm certainty, like he already knew how this would end. And that was the part that unsettled me the most. Because a small, traitorous part of me was already wondering what would happen if I said yes. Fine, I said, and the word came out before I could overthink it, before I could pull it back and pretend I had more sense than this. And Lucas did not smile, not exactly, but something in his expression shifted, like a calculation had just confirmed itself. Fine, I repeated, slower this time, like maybe if I said it twice it would start to sound less insane. But this is temporary. He nodded once, immediate, like that condition had already been built into whatever plan he was running in his head. Temporary, he agreed, and somehow that word felt heavier coming from him, like it carried more meaning than it should. I pointed at him, because I needed something to anchor this conversation in reality. And you explained things. No vague situation answers. If I am doing this, I need to know what I am walking into. You will, he said, calm as ever. I will handle anything that affects you. That was not the reassurance he probably thought it was. It sounded less like protection and more like control, and I was not sure which one bothered me more. Still, I nodded, because apparently I had already committed to this questionable life choice. Okay, I muttered, exhaling slowly. So what now? Lucas glanced at the door, then back at me, and for a split second his gaze softened in a way that felt real. Not calculated, not strategic, just there. Now, he said, stepping closer again, closing that careful distance like it was part of the script, we make it believable. Too close. My brain registered it instantly, the shift in space, the way the air felt different when he was standing less than a foot away, the way my attention locked onto every small detail, whether I wanted it to or not. This was going to be a problem. A big one. Right? I said, trying to sound unaffected and failing just enough that I hoped he would not notice. Believable. That sounds easy. It was not easy. It became very clear it was not easy the second we stepped back into the hallway. The moment the door opened, it was like stepping onto a stage. Conversations dipped. Eyes turned. Someone actually whispered, "That is them." Like we were a headline instead of two people just trying to get to class. Lucas did not hesitate. He moved like this was expected, like this was normal, his hand finding my wrist this time, light but intentional, guiding me forward through the crowd. Not gripping, Not forcing. Just there. Micro. Controlled. Stay close. He murmured, just loud enough for me to hear. If you pull away, they will question it. Not helpful. Also accurate. I swallowed and adjusted my pace to match his. Hyper-aware of every step, every glance, every tiny reaction from the people around us. This was not just attention. This was scrutiny. Analysis. People were building stories in real time, and we were the center of it whether we liked it or not. A group of girls near the lockers leaned in, whispering rapidly, their eyes flicking between us like they were trying to decode something. A guy from the soccer team raised his eyebrows at Lucas in a silent question that Lucas ignored completely, unbothered, always unbothered. I, on the other hand, was one wrong move away from spontaneously combusting. You look like you are about to run, Lucas said under his breath, not looking at me, his tone almost amused. I am thinking about it. I shot back quietly, keeping my smile fixed in place because apparently that was part of the performance now. Strongly, his thumb brushed lightly against my wrist, a brief, grounding motion that made my thoughts stutter for half a second. Do not, he said simply. And the worst part was, I did not. I stayed. I walked beside him down the hallway like this was real, like this was something I knew how to do, like I was not completely out of my depth. Because somewhere between the stares and the whispers and the steady presence at my side, a new realization settled in, quiet but undeniable. This was not just his world anymore. Somehow, unbelievably, it was mine now too. By lunchtime, I realized two things very clearly. One, there was no such thing as low profile anymore. And two, Lucas Hale did not do anything halfway. The cafeteria felt different the second we walked in, like the air shifted to make space for him automatically, conversations pausing just long enough to register his presence before picking back up in quieter, sharper tones. Except this time, it was not just him they were watching. It was us. I almost stopped at the entrance, instinct kicking in, telling me to turn around, grab something from a vending machine, disappear somewhere quiet where no one knew my name. Lucas did not let that happen. His hand found my shoulder this time, light but certain, guiding me forward like it was the most natural thing in the world. Not forcing, just expected. You are thinking about escaping again, he said under his breath, his tone calm, almost amused. I kept my eyes forward, focusing on the far wall like it held all the answers I needed. I am evaluating my options, I muttered. One of which includes pretending this is a very realistic dream. He huffed softly, the sound barely there, but enough to throw me off for half a second. Stay, he said simply. Just that. No explanation. No pressure. And somehow that made it harder to argue. We reached the center tables, the ones everyone knew belonged to him and his circle, and that was when the real test started. Conversations stopped completely this time. Not subtle, not hidden, just silence. A guy I recognized from the basketball team leaned back in his chair, looking between us with open curiosity. A girl across from him raised her brows, her gaze sharp, assessing. No one spoke first. Of course they did not. Lucas was the one who set the tone here. He did not hesitate. He pulled out a chair like this was routine, like we had done this every day for years, his hand brushing briefly against my back as I sat down. Micro. Intentional. Too smooth. I sat. Because apparently that was what I did now. I sat in places I had never been invited to before, next to people who would not have noticed me a week ago, all because Lucas decided I belonged there. He took the seat beside me, close enough that our shoulders almost touched, and that tiny almost felt louder than anything else in the room. So, the basketball guy finally said, breaking the silence with a slow grin. You want to explain? Or are we just rolling with it? Lucas did not even look at him. His attention stayed on his tray for a second before he answered, completely unbothered. There is nothing to explain. Simple. Clean. Final. That should have ended it. It did not. Nothing. The girl across the table echoed, her tone light, but edged with something sharper underneath. Her eyes flicked to me, then back to Lucas. You just show up with a boyfriend out of nowhere and expect no one to ask questions. Out of nowhere. That stung more than I expected. I kept my expression neutral, focusing on unwrapping a napkin like it required my full attention, like my entire world was not currently being dissected in front of me. Lucas finally looked up then, his gaze steady, unreadable. I expect people to mind their own business, he said calmly. The table went quiet again, but this time it felt different. Not curiosity, tension, something unspoken settling between them that I could not fully read. The girl held his gaze for a second longer, then leaned back slightly. A small, knowing smile tugging at her lips. Sure, she said lightly. Whatever you say. But she did not look convinced. Not even a little. And as the conversation slowly restarted around us, quieter but far from over, I felt it again. That shift. That pressure. This was not just about pretending anymore. There were layers here I did not understand. People who were not buying the story, and a version of Lucas that was still carefully hidden behind that calm, controlled exterior. I glanced at him briefly, just for a second, and caught something unexpected. His jaw was tight, subtle, almost invisible if you were not looking for it. But it was there, which meant one thing. This was not as easy for him as he was pretending it was. And for some reason, that made everything feel even more real. By the end of lunch, I could feel it settling in, not just the attention but the pattern of it, the way people kept looking, then looking again, like they were trying to solve something that did not quite add up. And the worst part was, they were right. It did not add up. Not Lucas. Not me. Not this. I pushed my tray away, appetite gone somewhere between the whispers and the way that girl had looked at us like she already knew something I did not. Lucas noticed immediately. Of course he did. He noticed everything. You barely ate, he said quietly, his voice low enough that it did not carry beyond our side of the table. Not accusing, just observing. I shrugged, pretending it was nothing, even though my thoughts were anything but. I am not really hungry. That was not true. I just could not focus on something as normal as food when my entire life had flipped in less than 6 hours. His gaze lingered on me for a second longer than necessary, like he was trying to read something under the surface, something I was not saying out loud. Then he nodded once, like he had decided not to push. We should go, he said, standing up smoothly. And just like that, the small pocket of attention at the table shifted again, people tracking the movement without even trying to hide it. I stood too, a second slower, still adjusting to the idea that leaving a table like this meant people were watching how I moved, how close I stood to him, whether I hesitated. Everything mattered now. Performance. Always performance. We barely made it halfway across the cafeteria before it happened. Lucas. The voice cut through the noise clean and sharp. Not loud, but impossible to ignore. He stopped instantly. So did I? Of course I did. I did not even need to turn around to know this was not just another curious classmate. There was something in the way he held still, something tight and controlled, like this was expected but not welcome. I turned slowly, and that was when I saw her. Tall, polished, the kind of presence that did not need volume to command attention. Her eyes locked onto Lucas first, then flicked to me, quick but precise, like she was assessing, measuring, deciding. You did not answer my texts, she said, her tone even, but there was an edge underneath it that made the air feel thinner. Lucas did not react right away. He just looked at her, expression neutral, unreadable, like he was choosing his response carefully. I was busy, he said finally. Simple. Controlled. Not enough. It was never going to be enough. Her gaze shifted back to me, slower this time, more deliberate. I felt it like pressure, like being pulled into something I had not agreed to be part of. This is new, she said, and it was not really a question. I resisted the instinct to step back, to create space, because I could feel Lucas beside me, steady, unmoving, and I knew pulling away now would break whatever illusion we had built. Not part of the deal. Not allowed. Yes, Lucas replied, calm as ever. One word. Final. She smiled then, but it did not reach her eyes. Interesting timing. There it was. The part one was missing. The reason. The situation. It was standing right in front of me, and I still did not understand it. My chest tightened slightly, not from fear, not exactly, but from that same creeping awareness that I was in the middle of something bigger than I had been told. Lucas shifted then, just a fraction, his shoulder brushing mine, a subtle movement that grounded me before I even realized I needed it. We are leaving, he said, his tone polite but firm, like this. Conversation was already over in his mind. She did not move. Of course she did not. Her eyes stayed on me for one more second, sharp and searching, like she was trying to find something specific, something that would confirm whatever she was already thinking. Then she stepped aside, just enough to let us pass. We will talk later, she said to Lucas, quiet but certain. Not a request. A promise. We walked. Or at least Lucas did, and I matched him because that was what I did now. Stayed close. Stayed in sync. Did not break character. But my thoughts were louder than ever, racing to catch up with the pieces I had just been handed. Rumors. Complications. Timing. And her. Whoever she was not just part of the story. She was the reason it started. I glanced at Lucas as we stepped into the hallway, searching his expression for something, anything that would make this clearer. He did not look at me right away. His jaw was tight again, that same subtle tension from before, but stronger now. And for the first time since this whole thing began, I realized something I had not considered before. Maybe I was not the only one pretending. Maybe Lucas was too. And I had no idea which parts of him were real. The hallway felt louder after that, even though nothing had really changed. Same lockers, same voices, same footsteps echoing against tile. But now there was something under it, something tight and unsettled, like I had walked into the middle of a conversation that started long before I got here. Lucas did not say anything at first. He just kept walking, pace steady, expression back to that calm, controlled version of himself like the moment in the cafeteria had never happened. Like she had never happened. I gave it about 10 seconds before I broke. You were going to tell me about that, right? My voice came out quieter than I expected, not confrontational, just careful. He did not stop walking. Of course he did not. He said. Simple. Too simple. Not enough. I exhaled slowly, matching his pace, refusing to let this slide, even though part of me wanted to pretend I did not care. And when exactly were you planning on doing that? Before or after she stared me down like I was part of a problem I did not create? That got a reaction. Small, but there. His jaw tightened again, just for a second, before he glanced at me. Her name is Claire, he said. Not an apology. Not an explanation. Just a name. I waited. He kept walking. Right. So this was how this was going to go. Okay. I said, a little sharper now. And Claire is what? Your ex? Your problem? The reason I suddenly have a role in whatever this is. He stopped then. Finally. Right in the middle of the hallway, like the rest of the school did not exist for a second. People moved around us, but it felt distant, like background noise fading out while everything else sharpened into focus. He turned toward me fully this time, and the calm expression was still there, but it was thinner now, like something underneath it was pushing through. She is part of the reason, he said. Honest, but still not the whole truth. I crossed my arms, holding his gaze. Part is not enough. A beat of silence stretched between us. He studied me for a second, like he was reassessing something, recalculating. Then he sighed, quiet but real, and that alone felt like a shift. Less control, more something else. Claire and I were never officially together, he said. But people assumed. It was convenient. Convenient. That word again. It settled somewhere uncomfortable in my chest. And now? I asked. Now it is not, he replied. His eyes flicked away briefly, then back to mine. She does not like that. Understatement of the year. I huffed a quiet breath, trying to process that. So your solution was to replace the assumption with a different one? I replaced it with something clear, he corrected. Of course he did. Always precise. Always controlled. I shook my head slightly, not fully disagreeing, but not convinced either. You could have picked anyone. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Too honest. Too close to something I was not ready to define. He did not answer right away. That was new. Lucas Hale always had an answer. Always. But this time, he just looked at me, something quieter in his expression, something less calculated and more deliberate. I did not want to pick. Just anyone, he said finally. The words landed softer than I expected, but they hit harder because of it. My thoughts stalled for a second, completely thrown off by the way he said it. Like this was not just strategy, not just convenience. Like there was a reason that went beyond everything he had told me so far. I swallowed, trying to recover some kind of balance. That still does not explain why me. His gaze held mine, steady, unreadable, but not distant anymore. It will, he said quietly. Just not all at once. Not all at once. I should have pushed harder. I should have demanded a real answer, something concrete, something that made sense. But instead, I nodded. Just once. Because somehow, despite everything, despite the confusion and the attention and the fact that I was standing in the middle of a situation I barely understood, I believed him. And that might have been the most dangerous part of all. By the time last period ended, the entire day felt unreal, like I had been moving through someone else's life on autopilot, hitting every mark without fully understanding the script. The final bell rang, sharp and loud, and for a second, everything paused. Then the hallway flooded with noise again, lockers slamming, voices rising, people moving in every direction at once. Normal. Completely normal. Except nothing about my day had been normal. I packed my bag slower than usual, buying myself a few extra seconds to think, to breathe, to maybe figure out what exactly I had agreed to. Fake relationship. Temporary. Simple. That was what Lucas said. That was what I was supposed to believe. But the way people looked at us, the way Claire had spoken, the way Lucas kept saying just enough but never everything, it did not feel simple. Not even close. You are thinking too hard again. His voice came from behind me, low and familiar in a way that should not have felt familiar after one day. I glanced over my shoulder. He was leaning against the doorframe like he had been there the whole time, like he had just been waiting. Of course he had. I think that is a reasonable response to everything that happened today, I replied, slinging my bag over my shoulder. He pushed off the frame and stepped closer, stopping just within that now familiar distance that always felt intentional. Controlled. You handled it well, he said. No teasing, no sarcasm, just straightforward. I blinked, caught off guard. I did not exactly have a choice. You did, he said quietly. You could have walked away. I could have. That was true. I had multiple chances. At the stairs, in the classroom, in the hallway, even now. And yet, I had not. I shifted slightly, adjusting the strap on my shoulder, more to give myself something to do than anything else. And leave you to explain that in front of half the school, I said, attempting humor but landing somewhere closer to honesty. His gaze held mine for a second longer than usual, something unreadable flickering there again. I would have handled it. I believed him. That was the problem. I nodded once, then turned toward the door. So what now? I asked, stepping into the hallway, already bracing myself for whatever version of attention waited outside. We go home, he said simply, falling into step beside me like it was automatic. Like it had always been automatic. We walked in silence for a few seconds, not uncomfortable exactly, just aware. Everything felt more aware now. Every step, every glance, every inch of space between us, or lack of it. We made it to the front doors when something caught my attention. Not loud, not obvious, just off. A group of students standing near the exit, phones angled slightly, voices low but focused. Watching, not casually, intentionally. I slowed just a fraction. Lucas noticed immediately. Of course he did. Do not stop, he murmured under his breath, his tone shifting, sharper now. I did not argue. I kept walking, even as the feeling settled in my chest, tight and uneasy. This was not curiosity anymore. This was something else. We stepped outside, the late afternoon light hitting a little too bright after the fluorescent halls, and that was when I saw it. A phone screen, held just high enough to catch us both in frame. Recording. My stomach dropped slightly, not from fear exactly, but from the sudden realization of what this meant. This was not staying inside the school. This was spreading. Fast. Lucas, I said quietly, not breaking stride. They are filming. I know, he replied, just as quiet, just as calm. Too calm. That was what made it worse. He did not look at them. He did not react. Instead, his hand found mine. Not my wrist this time. My hand. Fingers brushing first, then settling, light but unmistakable. Not forced. Not rushed. Just there. My thoughts stalled for half a second, completely derailed by the shift. This was new. This was not something we had practiced. Not something he had warned me about. Not part of the deal. I glanced at him instinctively, searching for some kind of signal, some indication this was just another calculated move. But his expression did not change. Calm, steady, and somehow softer. Stay with me, he said quietly, not looking at me, his grip steady but not tight. Stay with me, not stay close, not play along. Stay? The difference hit harder than it should have. And before I could stop myself, before I could overthink it or question it, or pull away like I probably should have, I did. I stayed. We did not stop walking until we were far enough from the main entrance that the noise thinned out and the eyes on us started to feel less immediate, but the feeling did not disappear. It lingered, like something had already been set in motion and there was no way to pull it back. Lucas let go of my hand first. Not abruptly, just a quiet release, like it had served its purpose. The absence hit faster than I expected. My fingers felt colder without the contact, which was ridiculous, and I shoved my hands into my jacket pockets before I could think too much about it. So that is it, I said, keeping my tone even though my thoughts were anything but. We just walk around holding hands now, whenever someone pulls out a phone. He glanced at me briefly, then back ahead. If they believe it, they stop looking for something else. That answer should have made sense. It did make sense, but something about it felt incomplete, like it explained the action, not the reason behind it. I slowed slightly, forcing him to match my pace this time. And what exactly are they supposed to be looking for? He did not answer right away. That pause again. That same careful silence that meant he was choosing what to say and what to leave out. Something that is not there, he said finally. Vague. Too vague. I stopped walking completely this time. That is not an answer. He stopped too, turning toward me, and for a second the calm expression slipped. Not gone. Just thinner. It is the only one you need right now. Right now? That phrase again. Always later. Always not yet. I let out a breath, frustration building under the surface, mixing with something else I did not want to name. You keep saying that, I said quietly. Like there is some bigger explanation you are just waiting to drop when it is convenient. His gaze held mine, steady but not distant. There is, he said. No hesitation. No denial. Just truth. That should have reassured me. It did not. It made everything feel heavier. Because it meant this was not just about rumors or Claire or convenience. There was more. And I was standing in the middle of it without knowing the rules. I shook my head slightly, stepping back half an inch, just enough to create space. You should have told me everything before I agreed to this. There it was. The line I had been circling around all day. His expression shifted again, something quieter settling in, something almost like regret, but not quite. If I had, he said slowly, you would have said no. I opened my mouth, ready to argue, to say that was not true, that I would have made an informed decision, that I would have still. I stopped, because I did not actually know if that was true. And the fact that I hesitated for even a second said more than I wanted it to. He noticed. Of course he did. His voice softened, just slightly. I needed you to say yes. Needed. Not wanted. Not preferred. Needed. That word landed harder than anything else he had said all day. My chest tightened, not from anger this time, but from something more complicated, something that sat somewhere between confusion and something dangerously close to understanding. That does not make it okay, I said, quieter now. He nodded once. I know. No argument. No defense. Just acceptance. And somehow, that made it worse. The silence stretched between us again, heavier this time, filled with everything that had not been said. I looked away first, focusing on the sidewalk, on the cracks in the concrete, on anything that was simple and real and not this complicated mess I had stepped into. You said this was temporary. I muttered, more to myself than to him. It is, he replied immediately. Too fast. Too certain. I nodded slowly, even though something about that answer did not sit right anymore. Temporary. That was the plan. That was the deal. But the way people were watching, the way Claire had looked at me, the way Lucas kept holding back pieces of the truth, it did not feel temporary. It felt like the beginning of something I did not understand yet. And that was the part that made me uneasy. Because for the first time since this started, I was not just reacting to what was happening. I was starting to care about why. That night, everything felt quieter than it should have. My room looked the same, my desk, my bed, the half-finished assignments sitting exactly where I left them that morning, but none of it felt normal anymore. I dropped my bag onto the floor and sat on the edge of my bed, staring at nothing in particular while my thoughts replayed the entire day on a loop I could not shut off. The announcement, the stairs, Claire, the way Lucas kept saying just enough to pull me in but never enough to let me understand. Temporary. I leaned back, running a hand through my hair, exhaling slowly like that might clear something in my head. It did not. My phone buzzed against the desk, sharp and sudden in the quiet room. I glanced at it, expecting a notification, maybe a message from someone asking what the hell was going on. It was Lucas. Of course it was. I hesitated for half a second before answering, like that small delay might somehow give me more control over whatever this was. Yeah, I said, keeping my voice even. Did you get home okay? His voice was calm, familiar in a way that still felt strange after one day. Simple question. Normal. Too normal. Yeah, I replied. You? I did. A brief pause followed, not awkward, just there. I could hear something. Faint on his end, maybe a door closing, maybe movement, but he did not rush to fill the silence. Neither did I. The video is already up, he said finally. Of course it was. I closed my eyes for a second, letting that settle in. Figures. I did not even need to ask which video. I already knew. The front steps. The hand holding. Everything. Out there. Public. Permanent. People will talk, he continued, his tone steady, like he was stating something inevitable instead of something that had the potential to flip my entire life upside down. They already are, I muttered. He did not disagree. Another small pause. Then, quieter. Are you okay? The question caught me off guard. Not because of what he asked, but because of how he asked it. Not strategic. Not calculated. Just genuine. I stared at the ceiling, trying to find the right answer. Something simple, something easy. I do not know, I admitted finally. Honesty slipped out before I could filter it. This is a lot. I know. He said it softly, like he actually did. That should not have mattered as much as it did. I shifted slightly, sitting up again, leaning forward with my elbows on my knees. You said there is more you are not telling me, I said, bringing it back to the one thing that had not stopped bothering me all day. That this is not just about rumors or Claire. Silence. Not empty. Intentional. I could feel him thinking on the other end, weighing something. There is, he said after a moment. Same answer. Same restraint. I let out a small breath, somewhere between frustration and resignation. Then why me, Lucas? I asked quietly. Really, not the safe answer. Not the convenient one. The truth. The line went quiet again, longer this time, and for a second I thought he might not answer at all. Then, finally, he spoke. Do you remember last winter? The question hit out of nowhere, sharp and unexpected. I frowned slightly, thrown off by the shift. What about it? The day it snowed before school, he said. Everything was delayed. The parking lot was a mess. I searched my memory automatically, pieces clicking into place slowly. Cold air. Ice. People slipping. Rushing. Yeah, I think so, I said. Carefully. Why? Another pause, but this one felt different. Less guarded. More certain. You stayed after, he said. There was a freshman who dropped his bag in the slush. Everyone walked past him. My chest tightened slightly, recognition sparking somewhere in the back of my mind. I helped him pick it up, I said slowly, the memory sharpening as I spoke. It was not a big deal. It was to him. His voice was quieter now, closer, and it was to me. I stilled completely, my thoughts catching up all at once. You were there? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. I was, he said. No hesitation. No distance. Just truth. The room felt different again, like something had shifted into place that I had not even realized was missing. You did not know it was me, he continued. You did not do it for attention. You just did it. Simple. Direct. Real. I exhaled slowly, my mind racing through everything I thought I understood about today and rearranging it piece by piece. So you picked me because of that. I asked softer now. I chose you because I knew who you were, he corrected. Not convenient. Not random. Not safe. Known. The words settled deep, heavier than anything else he had said so far. I leaned back slightly, staring at the ceiling again, but this time it felt different. Less chaotic. More focused. You could have just talked to me, I said after a second, quieter than before. You did not have to do all of this. A small breath came through the phone, almost like a laugh, but not quite. Would you have said yes? He asked. I thought about it. About yesterday. About who I was before all of this started. About whether I would have agreed to step into his world without being pushed into it first. I did not answer right away, because I already knew. Probably not, I admitted. Exactly. There was no smugness in his voice. No satisfaction. Just certainty. The line went quiet again, but it did not feel tense this time. It felt open, like something had finally been said that should have been said from the beginning. So what now? I asked after a moment, the question softer, less defensive than it had been earlier. Now, he said, and for the first time all day, there was no hesitation in his voice, no careful filtering, no holding back. We start over. Start over. Not continue. Not pretend. Start. I closed my eyes for a second, letting that settle in, letting the weight of everything shift into something new, something uncertain, but not entirely uncomfortable. For real? I asked quietly. A beat. Then, just as steady as before, for real. And for the first time since this whole thing began, the idea of staying did not feel like a mistake.